She was asleep on the number 23 bus at 10:14 on a Tuesday night, head against the window, mouth slightly open, still wearing scrubs from a shift that ended 6 hours before another one had started. 2 pay stubs in her right hand, crumpled, held tight even in sleep the way a person holds something when letting go has never been an option. The bus was almost empty, fluorescent lights flickering above her like they could not decide whether to stay on. 4 rows back, a man in a dark jacket watched her. Clean shoes, quiet eyes. He had heard her tell the driver her stop 40 minutes ago. She had passed it 3 stops back. He stood up. The number 23 bus ran its last loop through Philadelphia, at that hour, the way it always did, slow, unhurried, like it had nowhere important to be, and understood that most of the people still riding it felt the same way about themselves. The overhead lights buzzed and flickered in that particular rhythm of public transit after dark, not broken, not working properly either, just existing somewhere in between the way most things do when no one with authority is watching. The floor smelled of cleaning solution and old rain. The seats were molded plastic blue, once gray, now worn smooth by thousands of bodies that had sat in them and carried whatever they were carrying to wherever they were going and never left a name behind. There were 5 passengers. A man near the front with a grocery bag between his knees, eyes closed but not sleeping. A teenage girl 2 rows behind him with earbuds and scrolling through a phone with a cracked screen, her thumb moving in that automatic way that meant she was not actually looking at anything. An older woman by the rear door, clutching a handbag on her lap with both hands. And in row 6 from the back, a man in a dark jacket who was not looking at his phone, was not reading, was not sleeping. He was looking out the window at the streetlights passing one by one the way a person watches something they have seen 1,000 times but are not yet done seeing. He had boarded at the first stop, paid with cash. Exact change, not because he did not have a transit card, because he wanted to hear the coins drop into the box the way they had sounded when he was 8 years old, and his mother would hand him the fare and say, "Drop it in. Listen to it land." That is what responsibility sounds like. He sat in row 6. He always sat in row 6. Not too far front, not too far back. His mother had explained it once. You can see everything from row 6, baby. You see who gets on. You see who gets off. You see the whole bus without the whole bus seeing you. That was 27 years ago. She had been riding this route to the nursing home where she worked the night shift. 14 years on that same bus. Same row. Same seat, if she could get it. He had ridden it 3 times this month already. He did not need to be here. He lived 11 miles south of this route in a part of the city where the streetlights never flickered and the buses ran clean and on time and nobody on them had a grocery bag between their knees at 10 o'clock at night. He came here anyway. He did not tell his driver. He did not put it on his calendar. He simply showed up at the first stop, paid his fare, sat in row 6, and rode. That was when the woman got on. She boarded at Allegheny and Kensington, scrubs underneath. Pale blue, the kind they give you at hospitals, the color of something that was supposed to be sterile and clean, but just looked tired under fluorescent light. Over the scrubs, a hoodie that had been black once and was now the color of dust. A lanyard around her neck, tucked inside the hoodie, the plastic badge flipped backward so the name faced her chest. She carried nothing else. No bag, no book, no headphones. She told the driver her stop, Tioga, said it once, clear. The voice of a woman who had said that word at that hour enough times that it did not require thought anymore. Then she sat down 4 rows ahead of him, and within 90 seconds of sitting, her eyes were closed. Not slowly, not the gradual drift of someone getting comfortable. She sat and she shut down, like a machine that had been running past its limit, and the moment it was no longer required to stand or move or speak, it simply stopped. He noticed her shoes first. Sneakers, white once, the left heel worn down more than the right, the kind of uneven wear that comes from walking long distances with a slight lean, the lean of someone who carries something heavy on one side or simply favors one leg after too many hours. Standing, he noticed the 2 pieces of paper in her right hand, pay stubs, creased and wrinkled. She was holding them the way a child holds a permission slip on the bus ride home, not reading them, just holding. And even as her breathing slowed and her head tilted toward the glass, her fingers did not loosen. There is a kind of tired that is not about one day. It is not about staying up too late or working too hard on a particular afternoon. It is the kind that has been building so long it has stopped being a feeling and become a fact. The body carries it the way a house carries its foundation. Not thinking about it, not aware of it, just resting on top of it every single moment of every single day and calling that normal because there is no memory left of what not tired used to feel like. She had that kind of tired. He recognized it, not because someone had described it to him, because he had grown up next to it. He had watched it sit across from him at the kitchen table. He had watched it fall asleep in a chair before dinner was finished. He had watched it get up at 4:30 in the morning and put on scrubs and walk out the door without complaining. Not once he watched her sleep. The bus moved on. The streetlights passed. He walked forward. Not quickly, not slowly. The steady walk of a man who had already decided what he was going to do and was simply covering the distance between the decision and the doing. He stopped beside her row. He did not touch her shoulder. He did not tap the seat. He stood close enough for his voice to reach her and far enough that she would not feel crowded when she opened her eyes. He said, "Ma'am, your stop. Quiet. Even." The kind of voice that does not need volume because it knows exactly what it is saying. Her eyes opened, and the first thing that moved was not her head, not her legs, her right hand. It tightened around those two pay stubs the way a person grips something in the dark when they hear a sound they were not expecting. Reflex, automatic, the response of someone who has trained herself even in sleep to hold on to whatever she has because the world has taught her that letting go is how you lose things. He saw it. He did not say anything about it, but he saw it. And something about that small motion, that unconscious act of protection over two crumpled pieces of paper, landed in a part of him that he had not visited in a long time. She blinked, looked at the window. The streets outside were not the streets she was expecting. She knew it immediately. Her shoulders dropped, just for a second. A single breath, where the weight of the mistake showed on her body before she pulled it back and straightened and became again the version of herself that the world was allowed to see. She said, "How far past?" He said, "3 stops." She did the math. He could see her doing it. Not the math of miles, the math of minutes. How long to walk back? Whether another bus was coming. What time it was now versus what time she had told someone she would be home. Every minute passed was a minute someone else was waiting. Someone else was watching her children. Someone else was doing her a favor that she could not afford to owe more of. She stood up, pulled the hoodie tighter. Moved toward the rear exit. He said, "I can call you a car." She turned, looked at him for the first time. Really looked. Not with suspicion, not with warmth. With the flat, even gaze of a woman who has been offered things before and learned that nothing offered by a stranger comes without a cost. Even if the cost is invisible at the time, she said no, thank you. 2 words after the no. Polite, complete, final. Not pride, not stubbornness, something else. The particular discipline of a person who has built an entire life on the principle of not owing anyone anything, because when you do not have much debt, is not just financial, it is personal. It is a piece of yourself you hand to someone else and hope they do not use it. She stepped off the bus. He stepped off behind her. She noticed. She did not say anything. The night was cool. Early October in Philadelphia. The kind of air that reminds you summer is over and everything from here until spring is going to require a little more from you. She was 31 years old. She had 2 children, a boy named Deshaun who was 7 and a girl named Kaya who was 4. She woke up every morning at 5:15. She made 2 lunches. She packed them in the same plastic bags she washed and reused every night because a box of sandwich bags cost $2.19 and $2.19 mattered. She dropped the children at her neighbor's apartment at 5:45. Mrs. Odessa, 70 years old, lived 1 floor down, charged $400 a month to watch both kids. That was less than half of what the cheapest daycare in Kensington would have cost, and Mrs. Odessa did not ask questions about late pickups and did not charge extra when Ebony came home past 10. She just left the door unlocked and put a plate of rice on the counter. Ebony caught the 6 a.m. bus to Jefferson Hospital, where she worked as an environmental services aide from 6 to 2:30. That is the title they print on the badge. What it means is she cleaned rooms, patient rooms after discharge, operating rooms between procedures, bathrooms and hallways and waiting areas, and every surface that needed to be sterile before the next person arrived, and never thought about who made it that way. $14.60 an hour, 40 hours a week. At 2:30, she clocked out and walked 4 blocks to the bus stop and rode 22 minutes to the Coleman Logistics Distribution Center on Torresdale Avenue, where she clocked in at 4 and worked until 9:30 as a stock associate. She sorted packages and loaded pallets and scanned barcodes and moved inventory from one end of a warehouse to another under lights that hummed the same way the bus lights hummed. $16.25 an hour, 27 and a half hours a week. Not 30. Never 30. Because 30 would mean the company had to offer benefits, and benefits cost money. And someone somewhere in an office she would never see had done the math and decided that 27 and a half was the number that kept the math clean. Between the two jobs, she earned roughly $2,400 a month before taxes. Rent on the 2-bedroom apartment in Kensington was $1,150. Mrs. Odessa was $400. The bus pass was $96. Food for 3 people, bought carefully, bought with coupons, bought at the store that sold dented cans for 40 cents less, was about $300. The rest went to the electric bill and the phone bill and Kaya's shoes, because Kaya was growing fast and shoes do not wait, and the pair Ebony found at the discount store for $11 lasted 6 weeks before the sole came loose. And she glued it back with superglue, and it held for another 3. There was nothing left at the end of the month. Not a dollar, not a coin. There was no savings account. There was no emergency fund. There was only the weight of knowing that one unexpected expense, one sick day, one broken appliance, one anything would bring the entire structure down, because the structure had no margin. It had been built without margin. It ran every single day at exactly 0. And she ran it. She ran all of it. She got up at 5:15, and she packed the lunches, and she ironed the scrubs, and she checked Kaya's temperature, because Kaya had been coughing for 3 days, and the thermometer she bought at the dollar store was not accurate, but it was what she had, and it said 99.1, and she decided that was close enough to normal to send her, and she kissed both of them, and she walked downstairs, and she handed them to Mrs. Odessa, and she caught the 6 a.m. bus, and she cleaned rooms, and she rode to the warehouse, and she loaded pallets, and she rode the bus back, and she walked up the stairs, and she looked at her children sleeping, and she ate whatever was cold on the counter, and she set her alarm, and she did it again. Every single day, for 14 months. There is a word for this in economics textbooks. It is called the working poor. It sounds clinical in a textbook. It sounds measured. It sounds like something that can be studied from a distance and discussed over coffee. It sounds different when you are living inside it at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, and your body has fallen asleep on a bus, and your hand is still holding 2 pay stubs because even in sleep, you cannot stop accounting for where you stand. The man walked beside her. She did not ask him to. She did not ask him not to. The bus had pulled away. There was no other one coming. She was going to walk, and he was walking in the same direction, and that was the only fact that either of them acknowledged out loud. He was 46 years old. His name was Tyrone Walker. He was the founder and chief executive of Walker Distribution Corporation, 11 distribution centers across the eastern seaboard. His name was on a building at Temple University that he had funded 3 years ago. His face had been on the cover of Black Enterprise twice. He lived in a 4-bedroom penthouse in Rittenhouse Square, with a view of the skyline that most people only see in photographs. But the bus route 23 did not know any of that, and neither did the woman walking beside him. He had his reasons for being here. They were not complicated, they were not dramatic, they were just old. His mother, Gwendolyn Walker, had ridden this bus for 14 years. The night shift at Greenfield Senior Living, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. 6 nights a week for most of those years, because the weekend differential was an extra $1.75, and $1.75 mattered when you were raising a son alone, and the rent was always due before the check arrived. She sat in row 6. She had told him why once, and he had never forgotten. She died on a Tuesday night when he was 19. A stroke. At the bus stop on Allegheny, the same stop where the woman beside him had boarded 40 minutes ago, 10:47 p.m. She was on her way to work. She had not missed a shift in 2 years. She did not miss that one either. Her body just decided on that particular Tuesday that it had carried enough. He was not there. He was working the evening shift at a warehouse on the other side of the city. A job he had taken to help cover rent because his mother's hours had been cut that month and the landlord did not accept explanations. He found out at midnight when a neighbor called his cell phone. By the time he got to Temple University Hospital, she had been gone for 47 minutes. He started Walker Distribution Corporation 3 years later, built it from a single rented van and a contract to move medical supplies for a chain of nursing homes. He built it because he understood logistics. He understood it because he had grown up watching his mother manage the logistics of poverty, the careful math of which bill to pay first, and which bill could wait, and which bus to take, and how many minutes she had between the end of one thing and the beginning of the next. That was logistics. She just never got to put it on a business card. He came back to the bus 3 or 4 times a month, not on a schedule, not on any anniversary. Just when something in him needed to sit where she had sat and see what she had seen and remember what it felt like before all of this, before the money, before the offices, before any of it, he never told anyone. Not his assistant. Not his driver. Not the therapist he had seen for 2 years and stopped seeing because he did not think talking about it was the same as carrying it, and he preferred carrying it because that was what she had taught him to do. He rode the bus. He sat in row 6. And sometimes on nights like this one, he watched the other passengers and wondered which of them was running the same math his mother used to run. Which of them was one Tuesday night away from something breaking. Tonight it was the woman 4 rows ahead. The one in the pale blue scrubs with the pay stubs in her hand and the kind of tired that does not go away with sleep because it was never caused by a lack of it. He had watched her board. He had watched her sit. He had watched her close her eyes before the bus had even pulled away from the curb. And something in him, something very old and very quiet, had said a single word, Mama. Not because she looked like his mother, she did not, but because the exhaustion was the same, the exact same weight, in the exact same posture, on the exact same bus, at the exact same hour. And he had spent 27 years building something enormous, and he had not once in all of that building stopped to ask whether the thing he built was making that weight heavier or lighter for the people inside it. He walked beside her now. The streetlights in Kensington flickered the way they always did. Half of them worked, half of them did not. Nobody fixed the ones that did not, because nobody with the authority to fix them ever walked these streets after dark. He did not say anything. She did not say anything. The city moved around them the way it moves around everyone who walks through it late at night, indifferent, ordinary. A Tuesday in October that had no idea what it was becoming. They walked. Not together exactly, side by side, but with the distance that 2 strangers keep when neither one has agreed to be where they are. She walked slightly ahead. He matched her pace without closing the gap. The night had cooled. Early October in Philadelphia carries a particular kind of air. Not cold yet, but close. The kind of air that presses against your skin just enough to remind you that warmth is no longer free. You will have to pay for it soon. A heating bill, a heavier coat, another expense added to a list that already had no room. Neither of them spoke for half a block. The only sound was the distant wail of an ambulance somewhere east of Allegheny, moving away from them, carrying someone else's emergency to someone else's hospital, where someone like Ebony would clean the room after they were gone. He said, "Cold tonight." She said, "It is October." That was all. 2 sentences. The bare minimum required to acknowledge that another person exists without inviting them any closer. She was not rude. She was efficient. She had 20 minutes of walking ahead of her and no interest in filling them with conversation she did not ask for. They passed a corner store with its metal gate half down, a streetlight buzzing overhead like it was trying to decide whether to stay on, a parked car with a boot on its front tire, the ordinary furniture of a neighborhood at night. Her phone rang. She pulled it from her hoodie pocket, looked at the screen. Something in her face changed immediately. Not worry, not fear, something softer than both. The particular expression of a person who has been holding everything in place all day and has just seen the one face, heard the one voice that makes the holding worth it. She answered, "I know, baby. I know it is late." Her voice dropped into a different register, lower, warmer. Patient in a way it had not been when she spoke to him. "I will be there in 20 minutes. Did you brush your teeth?" A pause. "Did Kaya eat the rice I left?" Another pause. "Okay, go to sleep. I am coming." She hung up, slid the phone back into her pocket, kept walking. Tyrone did not speak, but he had heard every word, and something about the way she had said "I am coming" landed in a place he had not opened in a long time, because he knew that voice. Not hers, specifically, but the voice. The particular sound a mother makes when she is standing in the dark somewhere far from her children and she is pretending that everything is fine so they will not hear the weight in her words and carry it to bed with them. He had heard that voice every night for 19 years. Through a thin wall, through a closed door, through a phone line when his mother called from the nursing home on her break at 2 a.m. to check if he had eaten. "Did you eat, baby? Okay, go to sleep. I am coming." The same words, the same warmth pressed over the same exhaustion. 27 years apart, and the voice was identical. She said, "Sorry about that." He said, "How old?" 7 and 4. He nodded. Then quietly, the way a person confirms something they already know but needs to hear, out loud, he said, "You work 2 jobs." Not a question, a statement. He had seen the 2 pay stubs in her hand on the bus. He already knew. Ebony looked at him. Not with suspicion, not with openness, with the careful middle ground of a woman who has learned to measure every interaction by what it might cost her. She said yes. 1 word. No explanation attached to it. No story offered. No justification. Just the fact delivered flat the way you deliver something that is not a secret, and not a shame, and not anything other than what it is. A long moment passed. The ambulance siren had faded completely now. The street was quiet. He said, "Where is the second one?" She did not hesitate. There was no reason to. She said Coleman Logistics, the distribution center on Torresdale Avenue. He did not stop walking. His feet kept moving at the same pace. His hands stayed in his jacket pockets. His face did not change, but something behind his eyes shifted. Not shock, not surprise. Something slower than both. The particular quality of recognition that arrives when a fact you have known in one form suddenly presents itself in another, and the distance between the 2 forms collapses and you are left standing in the wreckage of your own understanding. Coleman Logistics was a subsidiary of Walker Distribution Corporation. It had been acquired 4 years ago as part of a regional expansion into last-mile fulfillment. The deal closed on a Thursday in March. He remembered the Thursday because his team had celebrated at a restaurant in Center City where the cheapest entree was $42 and the wine list started at $90. Coleman Logistics. 1,100 employees across 2 facilities. The Torresdale Avenue location ran 3 shifts. The part-time evening shift, 4 p.m. to 9:30, was staffed almost entirely by workers who held other jobs during the day. The scheduling was designed that way. The pay structure was designed that way. The 27.5-hour cap was designed that way. All of it approved in a policy document he had signed, without reading every line, because the summary had said optimized labor allocation model, and the projected savings had said $4.7 million annually. And he had nodded, because $4.7 million was the kind of number that makes people in boardrooms nod. There is a particular kind of reckoning that arrives not when you discover something new, but when something you already knew rearranges itself in front of you, and you can no longer look away from what it means. He said, "What do they pay?" She said, $16.25 an hour. Hours, 4 to 9:30. 5 days. Benefits. She almost laughed. Not quite. The corner of her mouth moved in a way that was closer to exhaustion than humor. She said, "No. They keep everyone at 27-28 hours. Just under the line. You go over 30, they cut your shifts the next week to bring the average back down. Everyone knows the game. Nobody says it out loud." She said it the way a person describes the weather. Not with anger. Not with resignation. Just with the flat familiarity of someone who has lived inside a system long enough to stop expecting it to be anything other than what it is. He asked the questions the way a man asks when he already knows the answers, but needs to hear them spoken by the person living inside them. Each answer was a number he recognized from spreadsheets and budget models and quarterly reports. 16.25, 27.5, no health coverage, no retirement match, no paid time off. She was describing his company to him, and she did not know it. They kept walking. The streetlights flickered. Somewhere a dog barked twice and stopped. Ebony pulled her hoodie tighter against the October air, and Tyrone Walker, who owned the warehouse where she loaded pallets 5 nights a week, and the policy that kept her hours below the threshold where her labor would have required him to treat her like a full human being with a body that needed medical care, walked beside her in silence and tried to find a place inside himself to put what he was feeling. He could not find one. He thought about the board meeting 6 months ago. The long conference table, the projector screen, the CFO, a man named Whitfield with glasses and a voice like a textbook, presenting the labor cost analysis for the distribution network. Slide 14. The one that showed the savings from maintaining part-time staffing below the benefits threshold, $4.7 million per year. The room had nodded. He had nodded. It was not a controversial slide. It was not even a notable slide. It was a number on a screen in a room full of people whose job it was to make numbers go in the right direction. 4.7 million. That was the number. Clean. Abstract. The kind of number that lives comfortably inside a spreadsheet, because spreadsheets do not have faces. Tonight, the number had a face. It was walking beside him in a faded hoodie with 2 pay stubs in its pocket and a 7-year-old son at home who already knew his mother was lying when she said she was fine. He had built a company that could move 200,000 packages a day across 8 states. He had not built a company that could keep a mother of 2 awake on a bus. 4,200 part-time employees across the system. How many of them were on a bus right now? How many had missed their stop? How many were walking home through neighborhoods where half the streetlights worked? How many were carrying 2 pay stubs because 1 was not enough and 2 was barely enough? And the distance between barely enough and not enough was 1 sick child, 1 late bus, 1 Tuesday night, where the body simply said no. He did not know. He had never asked. He had never had to. Because the distance between a signature on a policy document and its consequence on a sidewalk in Kensington at 10:22 on a Tuesday night was wide enough that a man could live his entire life on one side of it and never see the other. Until tonight. Until row 6. Until the pay stubs. Ebony was talking now. Not because she had decided to trust him, not because he had earned it, because she was tired. Tired in the way that strips everything back to bone. When you are that tired, you do not have the energy to maintain the walls you have built to keep strangers out. The walls are still there. You just cannot hold them up anymore. She said, "People think the hard part is the work. 2 jobs, 16 hours, the buses, the standing. They think that is the hard part. She shook her head, small, slow. The hard part is not the tired. The tired I can do. I have been doing the tired for a long time. She paused. The hard part is when my son looks at me and says, "Mama, you always look tired," and I have to tell him I am fine. And he is 7 years old, and he already knows I am lying. She said it without breaking, without her voice changing, without any of the performance that people sometimes add to painful truths to make them land harder. She said it the way you say something you have thought 1,000 times and never said out loud, and the saying of it does not make it better or worse, it just makes it real in a different way. Tyrone did not respond. Not immediately, not with words. He had nothing to say to that. Not because he did not care, because there was nothing a man who owned 11 distribution centers and a penthouse in Rittenhouse Square could say to a woman who cleaned hospital rooms and loaded pallets and rode the bus home at 10 p.m. and lied to her son about being fine that would not sound like an insult dressed up as sympathy. Any word he chose would carry the weight of the distance between them, and that distance was not something words could cross. It was something only action could cross. And he had not taken any action yet. He had only listened. And listening on its own costs nothing, which is exactly why it is the thing that people with everything offer first. He knew that, and it sat in him like something cold. They turned onto her block, Kensington. The buildings here were row houses packed tight with narrow stoops and windows where the light came through curtains that had been washed enough times to go thin. Cars parked bumper to bumper along the curb, some of them with inspection stickers, 2 years expired because the inspection costs $89, and $89 is a choice between knowing your car is safe and knowing your daughter has shoes that fit this month. A convenience store on the corner with steel mesh over the windows. Not decorative, functional. The kind of mesh that says this store has been robbed before and plans to be open tomorrow anyway. Half the streetlights on this block worked. The other half stood dark. No one had reported them. Or someone had reported them and no one had come. Both versions of the story end the same way. You walk home in the dark and you get used to it, and after a while you stop noticing that you are walking home in the dark because noticing takes energy, and energy is not something you have left at the end of the day. Ebony stopped in front of a building. Brick, 3 stories, a small stoop with an iron railing. She looked up at the 3rd floor, a window with light behind thin curtains. Mrs. Odessa, still awake, still waiting. She turned to him. She said, "This is me." 2 words. The same efficiency she had carried the entire walk. No invitation, no lingering, just the fact of arrival. Tyrone stood on the sidewalk. He wanted to say something. He could feel the shape of it in his chest. Something about what he had heard. Something about what he now knew. Something about the company he built, and the woman standing in front of him, and the straight line between the two that he could no longer pretend did not exist. But the words did not come. Not because they were not there. Because none of them were good enough. None of them were honest enough. None of them could carry what needed carrying without bending under the weight. She said, "Thank you for waking me up," he said. "You are welcome." She went inside. The door closed. He heard her footsteps on the stairs, faint, steady, going up. He stood on the sidewalk and looked at the 3rd floor window. The light was on. Then it was brighter for a moment as the apartment door opened. Then it dimmed again. He could see the shape of a person moving behind the curtain. Then a smaller shape. Then both shapes disappeared from the window. 12 minutes later, the light went out. 12 minutes. That was all. She had walked in and picked up her children and settled them back into whatever sleep they had managed and turned off the light and surrendered to the same exhaustion that had taken her on the bus. 12 minutes between coming home and shutting down. 12 minutes for everything that mattered. He pulled out his phone. Called a car. It arrived in 4 minutes. He got in. Said nothing to the driver. sat in the back seat with his hands on his knees, and watched Kensington slide past the tinted windows as the car moved south through streets that got wider and cleaner and better lit with every passing mile. 11 miles from her door to his. 22 minutes by car. A lifetime by every other measurement that matters. He arrived at Rittenhouse Square, took the elevator to the 14th floor, walked into 4 bedrooms and a view of the city skyline and a silence that cost $11,000 a month in rent and did not have a single human being in it waiting for him with the light on. She had a 7-year-old who waited up, a 4-year-old who needed to know if Mama was coming, a 70-year-old neighbor who left the door unlocked and put a plate of rice on the counter. He had a view. He sat down. He did not turn on a light. He did not take off his jacket. He just sat in the dark in a room that was worth more than everything Ebony Richardson had earned in the last 3 years combined, and he thought about a woman asleep on a bus holding 2 pay stubs that added up to a life that was not enough and never would be as long as the system that employed her was designed by people like him who could sign a policy and never once stand on the sidewalk where it landed. The city glittered through the window, beautiful from up here. Everything is beautiful from far enough away. He did not sleep. He did not try. He sat in the dark of his living room for 11 minutes after he walked through the door. Then he stood up and walked to the study and opened his laptop, and the blue light of the screen filled the room like something clinical, like a hospital light, like the lights in a warehouse on Torresdale Avenue. He logged into the Walker Distribution Human Resources portal. He had not opened it himself in over a year. His chief people officer sent him quarterly summaries. Clean, color-coded, green for retention targets met, yellow for areas of concern, red for critical. The Coleman Logistics Division had been yellow for 2 consecutive quarters. He had noted it in the margin of the report and moved on. Yellow was not red. Yellow was someone else's problem to solve before it became his. He pulled up the employee database for the Torresdale Avenue facility. 1,093 names. He scrolled, not reading, just watching them pass, each one a row. Each row a set of fields. Employee number, start date, position, hours per week, hourly rate, benefit status. Employee number 4,891. Part-time, 27.5 hours per week, no health coverage, no retirement match. Hourly rate $16.25. He had looked at tables like this hundreds of times, in board meetings, in quarterly reviews, in the back of town cars on the way to the airport. They were always just rows, just data, just the raw material of decisions that someone with a title and an office was paid to organize into something that made sense on a balance sheet. Tonight, they were not rows. Tonight, each row was a person on a bus. He typed her name into the search field. Richardson. Ebony. The system returned one result. Employee number 4,812. Start date 14 months ago. Position stock associate. Shift 4 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Monday through Friday. Hours per week 27.5. Benefits none. Emergency contact Mrs. Odessa Grant. Relationship listed as neighbor. Not a mother. Not a sister. Not a husband. A neighbor. Because when you have no one else, a 70-year-old woman, 1 floor down, who leaves the door unlocked, becomes the closest thing to a safety net that your life allows. He clicked on her performance record. 14 months of entries. Not a single absence. Not a single late arrival. Not one. In 14 months. This woman had shown up to her second job every single day after finishing her first job every single day, and she had not missed once. The evaluation field beside the most recent review read 2 words. Meets expectations. 2 words. 14 months of arriving on time after cleaning hospital rooms since 6 a.m. and riding 2 buses and changing out of one uniform and into another and standing for 5.5 more hours under fluorescent lights moving boxes down a conveyor line. 14 months of that, and the system that tracked her reduced all of it to 2 words that meant she was adequate, that she had done what was asked. that she had met the minimum standard required for someone to not be fired. Meets expectations. He stared at those two words for a long time. Then he closed her file and opened something else. The Labor Policy Manual for Walker Distribution Corporation Subsidiary Operations Division. Section 9. Workforce Classification and Scheduling Guidelines. He had signed off on this document 3 years ago. Page 47. The paragraph that defined the part-time threshold. Any employee scheduled for fewer than 30 hours per week shall be classified as part-time and shall not be eligible for company-sponsored health insurance, retirement matching, or paid leave benefits. It had not been written with cruelty. It had been written with arithmetic. The financial modeling team had calculated that maintaining the part-time threshold across all subsidiary warehouse operations would save approximately $4.7 million annually in benefits costs. The recommendation had been approved unanimously by the board. He had read the summary. He had nodded. He had signed. There is a distance between a decision and its consequence that wealth makes almost infinite. A man signs a policy in a conference room in Center City at 10:15 on a Thursday morning. 14 months later, a woman falls asleep on a bus in Kensington at 9:47 on a Tuesday night. The signature and the exhaustion are connected by a straight line that runs through spreadsheets and scheduling software and HR portals and weekly shift caps designed to keep a number below a threshold so that a company does not have to pay for the body that carries that number home every night. But the man who signed never sees the line. The line is invisible from the 14th floor. It is invisible from the back seat of a town car. It is invisible in every room where the people making the decisions never have to sit in the rooms where the decisions land. Until tonight. Until a woman on a bus held 2 pay stubs in her sleep and one of them had his name behind it. He thought about his mother, Gwendolyn, who had worked the night shift at the nursing home and the weekend shift at the laundromat on Lehigh Avenue, who had ridden the number 23 bus for 14 years, who had fallen asleep on that bus more times than he could count because her body could not hold the hours her life demanded. He had built this company because of her, because of what she carried, because he had sworn at 19 years old, standing in a hospital hallway where they told him she was gone, that he would build something that meant no one in his family would ever have to work like that again. And he had done it. For his family. For himself. But the company he built to escape what his mother endured had become the very thing that made other mothers endure it. The same hours. The same exhaustion. The same bus. The same math of not enough. Different name on the paycheck. Same weight on the body. He had become the system his mother died inside of. He closed the laptop. The room went dark. He sat there. 112 A.M. A man worth $1.4 billion alone in a penthouse that could fit Ebony Richardson's entire apartment in its living room, and for the first time in 27 years of building, he was not sure that what he had built was something his mother would recognize as good. Ebony Richardson was not unusual. That was the thing. She was not an outlier. She was not an edge case. She was not a tragic exception that the system had somehow failed to catch. She was the system working exactly as it was designed to work. In the United States, roughly 8 million people work more than one job at any given time. That number has held steady for years, rising and falling slightly with the economy, the way a tide rises and falls without ever actually leaving the shore. Among single mothers, the rate is nearly double the national average. 1 in 5 single mothers in America holds more than one job. Not because they want to, not because they are ambitious, because one job does not cover the cost of being alive and raising children in a country where the price of everything has risen faster than the wage attached to doing it. The federal minimum wage has not changed since 2009. It has been $7.25 an hour for over 17 years. In Philadelphia, the effective minimum is closer to $15 for many employers, sometimes $16, sometimes a little more. It sounds like progress until you put it next to the cost of living in the same city. The average rent for a 2-bedroom apartment in Philadelphia is $1,400 a month. The average cost of childcare for 2 children is over $19,000 a year. The math does not work. It is not close to working. It is not a gap. It is a canyon. And the people inside it are not falling. They are running. They are running as fast as they can, and the canyon is still getting wider underneath them. The part-time trap makes it worse. Large companies, corporations, with billions in revenue and legal teams that cost more per hour than their warehouse workers earn in a day, have learned to keep a significant portion of their workforce just below the threshold where benefits become mandatory. 27 hours, 28 hours, 29.5, never 30. The scheduling software does it automatically now. It is not a manager deciding. It is an algorithm. It calculates the optimal number of hours that extracts the maximum labor at the minimum cost without triggering the legal obligation to treat the person doing the labor as someone who deserves health care. It is legal. It is common. It is practiced by companies whose names you would recognize in every sector from retail to logistics to food service to hospitality. And the consequence is a class of workers who earn too much to qualify for government assistance, but too little to survive without a second job. They exist in a gap, not poor enough for help, not paid enough to live, caught between two systems that were both designed by people who never have to stand inside either one. Tyrone Walker had built one of those systems, not with malice, not with intent, with efficiency, with the same logic that every business school teaches and every board of directors rewards and every quarterly earnings call celebrates. Reduce cost per unit of labor. Optimize headcount. Maximize throughput. The words sound clean in a conference room. They sound different on a sidewalk in Kensington at 10:22 on a Tuesday night when the person those words describe is walking home because she was too tired to stay awake long enough to hear her stop called. The cruelty of modern poverty is not that it is invisible. It is that it is visible and everyone has learned to look through it. The woman on the bus, the man stocking shelves at 9 p.m., the mother at the pharmacy counter picking up medication after her own shift because the delivery fee is $8 and $8 is lunch for 2 children. They are not hidden. They are everywhere. They are standing right in front of us. We have simply built a world where looking at them is optional for the people who have the power to change what they are standing inside of. Tyrone Walker looked. That was the difference, not because he was better. Because he happened to be sitting in row 6 on the right night and the right woman fell asleep close enough for him to see what his own company had made. 3 days later he drove to Torresdale Avenue. He did not call ahead. He did not bring his assistant. He did not tell his chief operating officer or his head of logistics or the regional vice president who managed the Coleman subsidiary. He drove himself, parked in the employee lot, got out of a car that cost more than most of the people inside this building would earn in 3 years and walked through the front entrance at 4:20 in the afternoon. The warehouse was exactly what a warehouse is. Concrete floors, steel shelving units 20 feet high, conveyor belts running the length of the building like mechanical rivers carrying brown boxes from one end to the other, fluorescent lights overhead, the same flat white glow that made everything beneath them look the same shade of tired. Forklifts beeping as they reversed, scanners chirping, the constant low hum of a building that never stops moving because the economy it serves never stops ordering. He told the shift manager he was from corporate. Operations review. The manager, a man named Davis, late 40s, clipboard in hand, the look of someone who has managed too many people with too few resources for too long, nodded and walked him through the floor. Tyrone asked about break times. Davis said 15 minutes per shift. He asked about the break room. Davis walked him there. A room the size of a large closet. 1 table, 6 chairs, 1 microwave. A sign taped to the wall that said, "Please clean up after yourself." 40 people per shift shared this room. Most of them ate standing up because there were not enough chairs, and the break was not long enough to wait for one. He asked about parking. Davis said free. But most of them take the bus. Second job people. They do not have a car, or they have 1 car and the other parent has it, or the car is broken and has been broken for 2 months because the repair costs $400 and they do not have $400. He asked about retention. Davis looked at him, not with suspicion, with the resigned honesty of a man who has been asked this question before and has given the same answer every time and nothing has changed. Davis said retention is rough. Average tenure is about 8 months. People burn out, Tyrone said. Why do they burn out? Davis said. Because this is their second job, sir. By the time they get here, they have already done a full day somewhere else. They come in at 4. They work until 9:30. They go home. They do it again tomorrow. They do it until their body says stop, or until they find something better. Most of them do not find something better. Most of them just stop. He said it without anger, without accusation, the way a person describes weather. It rains. People get wet. That is how it works here. Tyrone walked the floor. He watched the workers move, efficient, fast, heads down, not talking to each other, not because they were unfriendly, because talking costs, time and time costs, boxes and boxes cost, numbers and numbers cost a job they cannot afford to lose, even though it does not pay enough to keep. He saw her before she saw him, third conveyor line, blue scrubs still on underneath a warehouse vest because she had not had time to change between jobs, hair pulled back, scanner in her right hand, left hand pulling boxes off the belt and stacking them on a pallet. Fast, precise, no wasted movement. The mechanical efficiency of someone who has done this so many times that her body runs the task without her mind needing to participate, which is good because her mind was somewhere else. It was at home. It was with a 7-year-old boy and a 4-year-old girl. It was calculating whether Mrs. Odessa remembered to give Kaya the cough medicine at 6. She looked up. She saw him. A flicker of recognition. The man from the bus. The man who had walked her home. He was standing in her warehouse now, and she did not know why, and she did not have time to ask. She gave him a small nod, polite, distant. The nod of someone who is on the clock and every second belongs to someone else. Then she turned back to the conveyor belt and kept working. He watched the woman who had fallen asleep, holding 2 pay stubs, move 47 boxes in 22 minutes. He counted. 10 days later, the call came. He was in his office on the 32nd floor of the Walker Distribution headquarters in Center City, 2:14 in the afternoon. He was reviewing a draft of the revised workforce policy with his chief people officer when his phone rang. The caller ID said Coleman Logistics, Torresdale facility. He picked up. The voice on the other end belonged to the operations director, a man named Harlan. Steady voice. The kind of steady that comes from delivering bad news enough times that the delivery has become mechanical. We had an incident at Torresdale. Employee collapsed on the warehouse floor during shift. Paramedics were called. She has been transported to Temple University Hospital, Tyrone said. What is the name Richardson? Ebony Richardson. He put down his pen. He stood. He picked up his jacket. 3 actions. No words between them. His chief people officer asked if everything was all right. He did not answer. He walked out of the office and down the hall and into the elevator and through the lobby and into his car, and he drove north through the city toward Temple University Hospital the way a person drives when the destination is not a choice, but a gravity. The emergency department at Temple was what emergency departments always are, bright, loud in a muted way, full of people sitting in chairs with the particular patience of those who have no other option but to wait. He gave her name at the desk. They asked his relationship. He said employer. The word felt wrong in his mouth. Too small, too clean. It did not carry what it should have carried. They let him speak with the attending physician, a woman in her 50s, glasses, the kind of calm that is not personality but training. She said Ebony had collapsed at approximately 1:45 p.m. on the warehouse floor. She was conscious when the paramedics arrived. Vitals stable. The diagnosis was exhaustion, moderate dehydration, and iron deficiency anemia. Iron deficiency anemia. It is not a dramatic condition. It does not arrive with sirens or sudden collapse in most cases. It builds, slowly, over months, over years. It is what happens when the body does not get enough iron to produce the red blood cells it needs to carry oxygen to the muscles and the brain and the organs that keep a person standing. The symptoms are fatigue and weakness and dizziness and shortness of breath and pale skin and brittle nails and headaches that sit behind the eyes like something heavy that will not move. It is common among women. It is more common among women who work physical jobs. It is most common among women who work physical jobs and do not eat enough because food costs money, and money goes to rent and children and bus fare and the $11 shoes that last 6 weeks before the soul comes loose. It is not the kind of condition that makes headlines. It is not the kind that gets research funding or awareness campaigns or celebrity endorsements. It is the kind that sits quietly inside a person's body and takes a little more from them every day while they keep showing up and keep working and keep telling their children they are fine, until one afternoon the body decides it has been lied to long enough. The doctor said, "She is not in danger right now, but if she continues at this pace without adequate nutrition and rest and treatment, this will become something more serious. Heart complications, organ stress. The body does not negotiate forever." She did not collapse because she was weak. She collapsed because she had been strong for too long without anyone noticing. Mrs. Odessa had come to get the children. The hospital had called the emergency contact number on file. A 70-year-old woman had taken 2 buses to pick up a 7-year-old and a 4-year-old from an after-school program she was not listed on because Ebony had not had time to update the forms, and the school had called Mrs. Odessa's number because it was the only other number they had. The system that held Ebony's life together was stitched from favors and old women and unlocked doors and the quiet faith that someone would show up because someone always had. It was not a system. It was a prayer. Tyrone walked down the hallway of the 4th floor. Room 412. The door was open. She was lying on the bed, eyes open, staring at the ceiling, an IV in her left arm, the hospital gown too large for her frame. She looked smaller than she had on the bus, smaller than she had on the sidewalk, not because she had physically changed, because the setting had changed. A woman walking home at night carries her own size. A woman in a hospital bed has been reduced to the size the institution assigns her. Patient, case number, bed 412. She turned her head when he stepped into the doorway. She said, "You again, not warm, not cold." The flat recognition of someone who does not have the energy to be surprised by anything anymore. He said, "I heard what happened." She looked at him, steady. The same look she had given him on the sidewalk the night he offered to call her a car. The look that measures a person by what they are about to say next. She said, "From who?" The right question, the exact right question. Because how would a stranger from a bus know that she had collapsed in a warehouse on Torresdale Avenue? How would he know her name? How would he know which hospital? There was no version of this that made sense, unless something she did not know was true. He did not pause. He did not soften it. He said it the way a person says something they have been carrying for 10 days and cannot carry any longer. Coleman Logistics is a subsidiary of Walker Distribution Corporation. I am Tyrone Walker. I own the warehouse where you collapsed. Silence, not the quick silence of shock, the long silence of assembly. She was putting pieces together. The questions on the sidewalk, the way he had asked about her hours, her pay, her benefits, the way he had listened too carefully for a stranger, the way he had walked her home through a neighborhood he clearly did not live in. She was not shocked that he was wealthy. She was not impressed. She was not intimidated. She was reorganizing everything she thought she knew about the last 10 days and fitting this new piece into the picture, and the picture it made was not flattering for him. She said, "So you own the place that takes half my waking hours and pays me just enough to need another job to survive." She paused, not for effect, because she was tired, and pauses were not a choice but a necessity. "And now you are sitting in the hospital where I ended up because of it." Another pause. "What exactly are you here to do?" She did not raise her voice. She did not sharpen it. She said it the way you say something that has been true for a long time and has only just now found someone to be said to. Even, flat, heavy the way a stone is heavy. Not because it is trying to be, because it is made of something dense and real, and there is no lighter way to carry it. Tyrone did not defend himself, did not explain, did not reach for any of the words that men in his position reach for when they are confronted with the human cost of their efficiency. He did not say it was complicated. He did not say he was working on it. He did not say he had not known. He said, "I do not have a good answer for that." She looked at him for a long moment. Then something in her face moved. Not softening, not forgiveness, something closer to recognition. The recognition that a person has just said something true instead of something useful. She said, "That is the first honest thing you have said." The room was quiet. The IV drip marked time. Somewhere down the hall, a nurse was talking to another patient about discharge paperwork. The ordinary sounds of a hospital at 3 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon. He said, "Can I sit down?" She looked at the chair beside the bed. Plastic. The same blue plastic as the seats on the number 23 bus. She did not say yes. She did not say no. She looked at the chair, and then she looked back at the ceiling, and that was permission enough. He sat. He said, "I want to cover the hospital costs, and anything you need while you are not working." She turned her head, looked at him, not with gratitude, not with anger, with the particular clarity of a woman who has heard offers before and knows what they cost. She said, "I did not collapse so you could feel better about yourself by writing a check." She said it without cruelty, without venom. She said it the way a person draws a line on the ground, not to attack, to protect. She was not going to become a story someone told at a dinner party. She was not going to be the anecdote that proved a rich man had a heart. She had not fallen on a warehouse floor so that the man who owned the warehouse could buy his way out of what that floor had done to her. Tyrone sat with that. He did not argue. He did not push because he understood it. He had grown up on the other side of that line. He had watched his mother refuse help from the church down the block 3 times in one winter because accepting it meant owing something she could not name and could not repay, and the weight of that unnamed debt was heavier than the cold. He understood that charity, when it flows downward from the person who caused the problem to the person who endured it, is not generosity. It is a transaction dressed in kindness, and she was not for sale. He said, "I am not here to help you." She looked at him. He said, "I am here because I need to understand what I broke." A long moment. The longest of the afternoon. She studied him the way a person studies something they are deciding whether to believe. Not his words, his face, the set of his jaw, the stillness of his hands. She was reading him the way she read everything, carefully, because care was all she had and she could not afford to waste it on someone who did not deserve it. Something shifted, not dramatically, not with any visible movement, but the distance between them, the distance that had been there since the bus, since the sidewalk, since he walked into this room, contracted by 1 degree. She did not trust him. But she was willing to believe that the thing in his voice when he said what I broke was not performance. She said, "Mrs. Odessa has my kids. She is 70 years old. She has arthritis in both knees. She watches Deshaun and Kaya every day for $400 a month because that is all I can pay. And she does it anyway because she says she likes the company. But the truth is, she does it because she knows I have no one else." She paused. She took 2 buses to pick them up today. 2 buses, at 70. She said, "Deshaun asked me last week, 'Mama, when do you get a day off?' And I opened my mouth and nothing came out. Because I did not have an answer. I could not think of one. There was no day. There was no off." She was not telling him for sympathy. She was not performing pain. She was saying it because someone had asked, and for the first time, the person asking was someone who had the power to understand what the answer meant. Not just emotionally. Structurally, he owned the building where she loaded boxes. He signed the policy that kept her hours below the line. He was not a stranger on a bus anymore. He was the architecture. and she was telling the architecture what it felt like to live inside it. He listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer solutions. He sat in the plastic chair in room 412, and he listened to a woman describe a life that his company had helped design, and he did not look away. She said, "You want to know what you broke?" She looked at him. Steady. Clear. The eyes of a woman who had been lying down for 2 hours and was still more present than most people standing. "You did not break me. I am still here. But you built something that makes it so people like me have to choose between being a good worker and being a good mother. And you made it so we cannot be both. Not because we are not strong enough, because the math does not allow it." She said it, and then she was quiet, and Tyrone Walker, who had sat in boardrooms with senators and on panels with Fortune 500 chief executives, and across tables from investors who managed more money than some countries, sat in a plastic chair in a hospital room and understood for the first time that the most important meeting of his career was happening right now, in room 412, with a woman in a hospital gown who made $16.25 an hour and had just told him more about his own company than anyone on his payroll ever had. He called the board meeting for the following Monday. Not a quarterly review, not a scheduled session, an emergency meeting. The word emergency raised eyebrows, because in the language of corporate governance, emergency means something is on fire, or someone is being sued, or a regulator has come knocking. Tyrone Walker was not dealing with any of those things. He was dealing with something the boardroom had no standard vocabulary for. He was dealing with the fact that his company was breaking people and calling it efficiency. He did not bring slides. He did not bring the chief people officer. He did not bring a consultant or a communications strategist or anyone whose job it was to make difficult things sound palatable. He brought himself and a single sheet of paper with 4 proposals written on it in his own handwriting. He read them aloud. Raise the minimum weekly hours for all part-time warehouse employees from 27.5 to 32, above the benefits threshold, effective within 90 days. Increase the base hourly wage across all subsidiary distribution facilities to $19 an hour. Provide basic health insurance to every employee regardless of hours classification. Establish a child care assistance fund for single-parent employees across all Walker distribution operations. The CFO, a man named Whitfield, the same man who had presented the $4.7 million savings slide 6 months earlier, did the math on the spot. He said the total annual cost of these 4 proposals would be approximately $12 million. The room went quiet. Tyrone said, "We made $340 million in profit last year. This is 3.5%. If we cannot afford to keep our people alive, then what exactly are we building?" Nobody answered. Not because they disagreed, because the question was not designed to be answered. It was designed to sit in the room and make everyone in it uncomfortable enough to act. There was pushback. There is always pushback when money moves downward instead of upward. 2 board members raised concerns about precedent. 1 raised concerns about shareholder perception. Whitfield said the numbers needed further modeling. Tyrone listened to all of it. Then he said, "Model it. But the decision is made. We are doing this. The only question is how fast." What the spreadsheets would eventually confirm, though it took the modeling team 3 weeks to produce the report, was something that researchers at places like MIT and Harvard and the Economic Policy Institute have been documenting for years. Companies that raise wages and provide benefits to their lowest-paid workers consistently see reductions in turnover, reductions in absenteeism, increases in productivity, and improvements in workplace safety. The $12 million was not a loss. It was a reallocation. The cost of constantly replacing burned-out workers who lasted an average of 8 months, recruiting them, training them, losing them, starting over, was already costing Walker Distribution more than $12 million. It was just spread across different budget lines, so no single number looked alarming enough to trigger a meeting. That is the trick of systemic harm. It hides in averages. It distributes itself across enough categories that no single metric screams loud enough for anyone to hear. You have to add it up yourself. And most people in boardrooms do not add it up, because adding it up means seeing the total, and the total means doing something about it, and doing something about it costs money, and money is the one thing the system was built to protect. Tyrone Walker added it up. Not because he was smarter, because he had stood on a sidewalk at 10:22 on a Tuesday night and watched the total walk home in a faded hoodie. Change does not arrive the way it does in speeches. It arrives in policy documents and implementation timelines and conversations with regional managers who have to restructure shift schedules and explain to supervisors why the hours are changing and answer the question that everyone asks, which is, why now? The answer to why now was a woman on a bus. But that answer does not fit in a memo. So the memo said strategic workforce investment, and the implementation began, and the change moved slowly, the way all real change moves. Not with fanfare, with paperwork. 5 months later, the number 23 bus moved through Philadelphia on a Tuesday evening, the way it always did. Same route, same stops, same hum of the engine, same flickering lights, but not the same passengers. Not exactly. Ebony Richardson sat in a window seat. 6:30 in the evening. The light outside was still gold. October had passed. March now. The days were getting longer again. She was wearing jeans and a sweater. Not scrubs. Not a warehouse vest. Just clothes. The clothes of a person who had finished work at 3:30 and picked up her daughter from school at 4 and picked up her son at 4:15 and dropped them both at home where Mrs. Odessa was waiting, not because Ebony could not be there, but because she wanted 10 minutes to ride the bus alone and sit in the quiet before she walked through the door. She was not asleep. Her eyes were open. She was looking out the window at the city passing, the same streets, the same buildings, the same Philadelphia that had been there every night when she rode this bus in the dark, with her head against the glass and her hand around 2 pay stubs. Everything outside was the same. But the woman inside the bus was not. She was working one job now, full-time, 7 a.m. to 3:30 p.m. Coleman Logistics, Torresdale Avenue, $19 an hour, health insurance. The shift change had gone into effect 8 weeks ago. She had quit the hospital job the same week. She had walked into the HR office at Jefferson and told them she was leaving, and they had asked if there was anything they could do to keep her. And she had said no, and she had meant it, not with anger, with clarity. With the calm certainty of a person who has been given back something they did not know they had lost until it returned. Time. In her hand, she was not holding pay stubs. She was holding a piece of paper, a drawing, crayon, on white construction paper, 2 figures, one tall, one small, both smiling. Underneath, in the careful, uneven letters of a 4-year-old, it said, "My mama is the strongest." The teacher had written a note in the margin. Kaya drew this during free time today. She said her mama is home for dinner now. The bus stopped. Her stop. She got off, walked the 3 blocks home, climbed the stairs, knocked twice. The door opened. Deshaun, 7 years old, standing in the doorway with the look of a boy who has gotten used to something new and good, and is not yet sure it will last. Behind him, Kaya came running, 4 years old, arms out. Ebony knelt down and held both of them at the same time. Not quickly, not briefly. The way a person holds something when they finally have enough time to hold it properly. Mrs. Odessa was sitting at the kitchen table. Same chair, same smile. She looked at Ebony and said, "Early again." "Huh?" Ebony said, "Early again." She cooked dinner. Rice and chicken and green beans from the can, because fresh ones were still $2 more, but that was going to change next month when the first full paycheck at the new rate cleared. She stood at the stove and she stirred the rice, and Deshaun sat at the table doing homework, and Kaya was drawing on the back of a grocery receipt, and Mrs. Odessa was telling a story about something that had happened at the laundromat on Tuesday, and nobody was watching the clock. Deshaun looked up from his notebook. He said, "Mama, you look different." She turned. "Different how?" he said. "You do not look tired." She did not say anything. She just stood there at the stove and let the sentence land. For 14 months, he had watched her come home in the dark. For 14 months, he had seen the weight in her eyes and the slowness in her hands and the way she fell asleep before he could finish telling her about his day. He was 7. He had noticed everything. Children always do. They do not have the vocabulary for it, but they have the eyes. And for 14 months, his eyes had been recording a mother who was disappearing 1 hour at a time. And now, here, at 6:50 on a Tuesday evening in March, standing at the stove with the light on and the rice cooking and nowhere else to be, she was back. She was not a different person. She was the same person with enough hours in the day to be who she had always been. Tyrone Walker did not call her. He did not check in. He did not send a card or a message or anything at all. He did not need her to know what he had done, and he did not need her to thank him for it. What he had done was not for her. It was for the 4,200 people in his system who had been carrying the same weight she carried and whose names he would never learn and whose faces he would never see on a bus. He still rode the number 23, once a month, still paid in cash, still sat in row 6, his mother's row. But something had changed in the way he looked out the window. Before, he had been looking for her, for the memory of her, for the ghost of a woman who rode this bus for 14 years and never came home from it. Now he was looking at the passengers. The woman in scrubs 3 rows up, the man with the grocery bag between his knees, the teenager with the cracked phone. He was looking at them, and for the first time in 27 years of building, he was asking the right question. Not, how much does this cost, but what does it cost them? Wealth does not make a man good. It gives him the choice to be. Most of the time, that choice is never tested, because the wealthy never stand close enough to the consequences of what they have built. They sign policies from the 14th floor. They review spreadsheets in the back of town cars. They nod at numbers that represent people they will never meet, and approve savings that are measured in dollars on one side and measured in exhaustion and hunger and missed bedtimes and collapsed bodies on the other. The distance protects them, not from the harm, from the knowing. This story is not about charity. It is not about a rich man saving a poor woman. That is not what happened. What happened is simpler and harder than that. A man stood close enough to see what he had built from the inside. And what he saw was not the company on the Forbes list. What he saw was a woman asleep on a bus holding 2 pay stubs because one job inside his system did not pay enough to live and another job outside. It was the only way to make the math work. And the math should never have required that. This story is fiction, but the numbers in it are not. 8 million Americans work more than one job. The part-time benefits gap is real. The scheduling algorithms that keep workers at 27 or 28 hours to avoid the 30-hour threshold are real. The iron deficiency anemia that eats through the bodies of women who work too much and eat too little is real. The 7-year-old who tells his mother she looks tired is real. He is in millions of homes tonight. I wrote this story because I believe that stories can make visible what spreadsheets cannot. A number on a page is easy to look past. A woman on a bus is not. If one person watches this and looks at the people around them differently, tomorrow at the cashier, the bus driver, the warehouse worker stocking shelves at 9 p.m., then this story did what it was supposed to do. If this story moved you, please subscribe to this channel and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment and tell us, have you ever worked 2 jobs just to survive? What did it cost you? Because the people carrying that weight deserve to be seen. And sometimes, being seen is where everything begins. Turn on notifications so you never miss another story like this one. And until next time, see the people around you. They are carrying more than you think.